Welcome to another episode of Swamp Talk, where we wade into the murky waters of Washington, D.C. and beyond. I'm your host, Matt Shoemaker, a former DIA and Navy intelligence officer. Brace yourself, folks, because today's episode plunges us into a geopolitical storm. From the terrorist attack in Moscow, Congress in turmoil with the spending bill, and much more. First off today, just over 12 hours ago, a horrific scene unfolded in Moscow. The Crocus Concert Hall became a nightmare as at least 6 armed attackers unleashed violence upon innocent civilians. Explosives were thrown, followed by a hail of gunfire. The current death toll stands at a staggering 133 people, and tragically it's likely to climb. The attackers initially fled the scene, but the FSB, which is Russia's version of the FBI, reportedly intercepted a white sedan carrying fleeing suspects a few hours later. Once stopped, though, about 6 men fled out of the car, but 2 of them were apparently captured. Reports at the moment suggest, though, that up to 11 individuals have been arrested across Russia in connection with the attack. In a televised address, Vladimir Putin pointed the finger at Ukraine, of all places, claiming the terrorists sought refuge there. Ukraine vehemently denies the involvement, emphasizing that their refusal to attack civilian targets is in stark contrast to Russia's own actions, especially over the course of the Russian-Ukraine war.
They were found and apprehended. They tried to escape. They were moving towards the border with Ukraine. And we have data that suggests that they were about to be moved towards the territory of Ukraine by those in Ukraine. Our military services, our emergency services, our investigators are working on finding out the orchestrators of this terrorist attack, those who gave them transportation, who gave them weapons, etc. The investigative authors will do everything to identify all details of this crime, but it's already evident that we face not just a cynically organized terrorist attack, but a mass killing of civilians. These perpetrators, these criminals, went specifically to kill people, point blank, our people, our children, just like the Nazis that once killed our people during the war. They do the same. All the orchestrators, all those who are responsible for this crime will inevitably be found responsible. They will pay. We will identify everyone who stands behind these terrorists, and they will pay. This is a strike against Russia. We know what terrorist threat means, and we expect that other nations that share our pain will cooperate with us, and we will stand united against this common enemy, international terrorism, no matter where it shows its ugly head. These terrorists have no nationality, and there's only one future for them: retribution and oblivion.
But to add another layer of complexity to it, ISIS-K, whom we thought was taken care of, unfortunately, wasted no time claiming responsibility for the attack. Meanwhile, unverified footage reports to show one of the captured terrorists, allegedly of Tajik origin, confessing to being recruited through Telegram, the encrypted messaging service, and he claimed that he was supposed to be paid about 500,000 rubles in exchange for it. He also said that those who recruited him delivered the weapons to the terrorists, but he has no idea who those people are, who recruited him. Now, if that's not something that I find hard to believe, then I don't know what is, but needless to say, the situation is still very confused, and the next 48 hours, I think, in particular, are going to be crucial in piecing together the full picture. From a more accurate death toll, certainly, but more to a deeper understanding of how the attacks themselves were orchestrated. Reports also suggest that American intelligence tipped off their Russian counterparts all the way back in November, interestingly enough, about potential attacks in the coming months. It raises a critical question for sure. Was it a single warning that they received, or was it a series of escalating alerts? The fact that this came about at least back in November, that's a 5-month gap. I find it hard to imagine this just being a one-off sort of discussion that they had. I certainly expect that those who were receiving these bits of information, both on the American and the Russian side, either didn't convey enough urgency to the situation, or they didn't take it credible, for that matter. The question I think all of us in the West have right now, though, is will Putin use this as an excuse to draft more men into the Russian military, potentially send them to Ukraine, or will he use this as an opportunity to crack down even further and become more of an authoritarian in daily Russian life? You know, this is a man that has gotten very good at clinging to power. He's 71 years old, and Putin recently secured another 6-year term just a few days ago, surpassing the reign of the genocidal madman Joseph Stalin. Over the past 2 decades in particular, Putin's meticulously eliminated any and all threats to his dominance. You might remember just earlier this month, the death of the opposition leader Alexei Navalny in a Russian gulag, if you will. And just early last year, Wagner Group's Yevgeny Prigozhin was killed in an alleged plane crash. Nonetheless, this all illustrates the chilling reality that Putin faces no internal checks and balances back at home anymore. Whatever his response to this crisis is going to be, it's going to go unchallenged in Russia. So that raises the question, what is going to be a mechanism to stop Putin if he goes too far? We all know as well, unfortunately, that President Biden is incapable of standing up to Putin. It's the reason why opinion polls routinely rate Biden's handling of foreign policy extremely poorly. According to Gallup, currently, his approval rating on foreign policy issues stands at a staggering 33%. And I'm also old enough to remember just a couple years ago when President Biden met President Putin in Europe, and Biden struggled to make it through the meeting without his bullet points. Putin would eat Biden for lunch and defecate Kamala Harris. It's gotten to be that horrific at this point. But as we continue to stay on top of developments coming out of Russia here at Swamp Talk, let's shift gears and come a little bit closer to home. Yesterday, the House of Representatives passed a massive $1.2 trillion spending bill to avert a government shutdown. The Senate passed it just a few hours ago this morning, and President Biden has said he will sign it. Of course, this is American politics, though, and so nothing is ever going to be clear-cut or easy. By that, I mean that Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, barely 6 months into the job, faces a potential mutiny from within his own ranks. It feels a little bit like Groundhog Day, as Kevin McCarthy was toppled back in September for the exact same spending issue, and it is being instigated by unfortunately, a member of the Republican Party who needs no introduction, Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene. According to the Associated Press, after the House passed the spending bill yesterday without amendments, as I mentioned, Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia filed a motion to vacate the Speaker's position. It's unclear exactly when the House will take this up, as the House is now in recess for the next 2 weeks. Given the Republicans have a majority of 2 in the House, and soon it will be a majority of only 1 when Representative Mike Gallagher steps down on April 19th, something that he just announced yesterday of all days,
With rules and promises to the American people that we would bring regular order back to Congress. Speaker Johnson has betrayed that by passing 3 CRs and then forcing us to pass or to vote on a 2-part omnibus, the second one being today. He also only gave us, I don't even know how, we had 1 day basically to read 1,012 pages, breaking the 72-hour rule. This is a betrayal of the American people. This is a betrayal of Republican voters. And the bill that we were forced to vote on forced Republicans to choose between funding to pay our soldiers and in doing so, funding late-term abortion. This bill was basically a dream and a wish list for Democrats and for the White House. It was completely led by Chuck Schumer, not our Republican Speaker of the House, not our conference, and we weren't even allowed to put amendments to the floor to have a chance to make changes to the bill. I filed the motion to vacate today, but it's more of a warning and a pink slip. I respect our conference. I paid all my dues to my conference. I'm a member in good standing, and I do not wish to inflict pain on our conference and to throw the House in chaos. But this is basically a warning, and it's time for us to go through the process, take our time, and find a new Speaker of the House that will stand with Republicans and our Republican majority instead of standing with the Democrats.
Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene effectively only needs one other Republican to join her to oust Speaker Johnson, assuming that all Democrats stay in file. However, interestingly enough, most of the Republicans who voted to oust Kevin McCarthy in September have said that they have reservations about doing the same to Mike Johnson, including Representatives Matt Gaetz and Tim Burchett, both of which voted to oust Kevin McCarthy. They said that now is not the time to take out Mike Johnson.
His agenda, here he is reacting to the filing today.
I don't know anybody that cares what Marjorie Taylor Greene says.
Currently, no, but I don't know what the option is, because right now, if we did it today and she understands this, we would put Hakeem in the Speaker's chair.
Now, there's a lot in the spending bill not to be happy with, for sure, especially regarding border security. The package itself runs over 1,000 pages long, and it was introduced within hours of the House voting on it, so it's almost guaranteed that none of the members of the House, both Democrat or Republican, actually even read the whole thing. Nonetheless, it would provide funding for the Departments of Defense, Homeland Security, Labor, Health and Human Services, Education, Department of State, and the legislative branch. The legislation itself would complete the funding of federal agencies through the rest of the fiscal year until September 30th. Congress earlier this month approved funding for the Departments of Agriculture, Commerce, Justice, Veterans Affairs, Energy, Interior, Transportation, Housing and Urban Development, as well as the FDA. Military construction and other federal programs were also included in the previous spending bill. In this particular spending bill, however, it includes nearly $62 billion in total discretionary resources for Homeland Security, meaning they could largely spend it how they like. It was the most contentious of the appropriation bills that lawmakers were negotiating. 43 members, though, of the House Freedom Caucus called for Republicans to reject the bill unless it includes key border protection provisions. The bill itself bolsters funding for processing, medical care, and the support of children's well-being for those who come across the border illegally, but it doesn't provide any money whatsoever for a border wall. It also would increase the number of detention beds to 41,500, which is up 7,500 beds than was provided for in the previous fiscal year. And U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services would receive an additional $281 million, including $160 million for refugee processing, asylum, and work authorization backlog reduction. So there's a lot of illegal alien processing funding in this bill, but very little for actually stopping them from coming in, and not a single word about instituting the Remain in Mexico policy. The package, interestingly enough, also provides $300 million for the Ukrainian Security Assistance Initiative that's going to aid the nation against the Russian aggression, according to the bill. The funding is separate from a larger assistance package for Ukraine that's currently bogged down on Capitol Hill that the Republicans, especially in the House, are refusing to take up. But on top of it, that is in addition to the $100 billion that we've already provided to Ukraine. Some good news, though, about the bill is that it fully funds the U.S. security commitment to Israel of more than $3 billion and prohibits taxpayer dollars from going to the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, which is an organization within the UN that supports Palestinian refugees and has certainly come under fire after Israel allegedly stated that some of its staff were involved in the Hamas October 7th attack. The bill also eliminates funding for the United Nations Commission of Inquiry against Israel, and it would implement new conditions on any assistance to Gaza. So this spending bill is certainly not a good piece of legislation. It's definitely not the worst, though, unfortunately, and I only highlighted some of the key points in it, but there's obviously a lot more to it since it's over 1,000 pages long. But the question is now the right time to remove Speaker Johnson over this? This is not, for sure, an omnibus spending bill, and thankfully, and hopefully, it never returns. But removing Johnson over this is literally one of the stupidest ideas the Republicans could possibly do right now. It's even stupider, politically speaking, than when Republicans earlier this week said they wanted to change the age of Social Security from 65 to roughly 75 years old. It only made a little bit of a blip in the legacy media, but that's not the way to win elections for sure. And as a former congressional candidate myself, I certainly saw up close and personal how inept the RNC corporate really is. They have their heads so far up their rear ends that they can't seem to understand how the rest of America reacts to their stupid idea fairies, this being certainly number one, especially in an election year. If you're the Republican Party and you think the way to win over the confidence of the American people is to tell them they have to wait an extra 10 years before they can receive Social Security, and then on top of it, you also show them that you're incapable of governing in the one chamber you do control. If you think that's a winning strategy, I'd love to know what color the sky is in your world. I really would. Honestly, it's the most, let's say, befuddling of situations that we're currently in. At a time when Joe Biden's approval rating is literally in the garbage, Republicans are trying to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. I mean, according to the Real Clear Politics average, President Biden has a 40.1% approval rating and a 56.4% disapproval rating, which is a spread of 16.3%. How does that even happen in modern American politics? But I'm actually just wondering who in the world are still part of the 40% that think that Joe Biden is doing a good job. It makes me think that with poll numbers like that the Republicans would be sailing to victory. Instead, it seems like they are actually actively trying to lose. It's absolutely ridiculous. All right, that's all for today's episode of Swamp Talk. We'll be back on Tuesday with another dive into the swamp. Thanks for joining me. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a review. We're also on social media, so follow us for the latest updates and to join the conversation. Until next time, this is Matt Shoemaker, reminding you to stay informed, engaged, and to drain the swamp one vote at a time.